So, Francesco, you have just published an article in Climate Law on the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, that have been adopted in 2015. And I know you actually went to Paris.
Yes,
and
I was
you've
there.
been involved in the Sustainable Development Goals in other ways. So I thought you would like to give us a taster of the article and explain to us how the Paris Agreement takes into account the Sustainable Development Goals.
Sure. Yes, I was in Paris. I was able to follow the last few days, the historical moment and so forth. And I have to say that in this article I was looking at precisely that, whether the Sustainable Development Goals were present or not in the Paris Agreement. And as usual, the answer is a yes and no. Definitely not if you look for the word Sustainable Development Goals in the text of the Paris Agreement. Slightly different if you look at the COP decision that accompanies the Paris Agreement. But the answer is slightly different if you look at the Paris Agreement as a whole, and if you look at the fact that sustainable development and poverty eradication are actually the context in which the Paris Agreement should operate. And if you think that the SDGs are all about sustainable development and poverty eradication, well, then the links become much clearer. When you then look into even more details of the Paris Agreement, you see a number of much more direct links. And these are, for example, not to name all of them, but you can see that SDG 11, which is about sustainable cities, has a link with loss and damage. One would not think about it, but you need resilient cities in order to deal with loss and damage aspects of climate change. And another SDG that we all work a lot here at the center, SDG 6, the water SDG, has strong links with climate change adaptation. So in the article you can start seeing this mapping, this exploring the links, which, okay, SDG as itself is not there, but the spirit of the SDGs is definitely in the Paris Agreement.
Okay, right. And obviously the big question when it comes to this is implementation. So how relevant do you think the SDGs will be in the implementation of the Paris Agreement?
They should. Whether they will is another question, but they definitely should. There's no reason why any stakeholder, be it a government official or any other kind of stakeholder involved in the implementation of the Paris Agreement, should not also consider the SDGs. You have, for example, SDG 7, the energy SDG. That has to be implemented along the lines of climate change mitigation and the Paris Agreement. If not, the two could go in very different directions, and that could undermine the goal of both the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. And the SDGs have also a climate change SDG, SDG 13. So one would think obviously they have to talk to each other. But it's not going to be easy. A lot of people are focusing on just one SDG or just on the Paris Agreement. So it's very important that these links, that this mutual supportiveness is highlighted in any occasion.
Okay. And finally, who do you think would be interested in reading this article?
I think an article that focuses on the links between the Paris Agreement and the SDGs will be of interest to a number of audiences. But I think in particular, because of the last answer I just gave to your question about implementation, anybody who's tasked, be it at the highest possible level of government or at subnational level, or even in the business environment or the civil society community, all of them have to be aware of these links. So I would think that a paper like this or any other study that looks at the linkages between the Paris Agreement and the SDGs is not just an academic exercise. It has actually a policy relevance and should be of interest, and hopefully people that are involved in the implementation of SDGs will have a chance to browse through it.